Hello everybody, and welcome back to FDLServices Healing Channel. I'm your host, Todd Dobson. Welcome to this forum. Today we are starting one of several book readings where I take excerpts from my book that should be published and out by Thanksgiving of 2025. The book is Healing the Past through the Melchizedek Healing Methodology. I'll start with portions of the introduction, and we start the introduction with a favorite quote of mine. The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen. By Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Now is always the right time to review, to accept, to heal, and to release. To create the person we wish to be means that we must first review our past to understand what has us stuck. The traumas and programming we endured during our earlier lives may keep us shackled to the past. The results are that most of us have gone through our lives with similar repeating patterns. These repeating patterns are indicative of our unhealed traumas and negative programs, which become so commonplace that by the time we reach our 40s and 50s, they become ordinary, typical, and even predicted. We gave in and gave up as we expected these patterns to persist throughout life. You likely have many different stories that you tell yourself about these repeating patterns, but none of them begin with you. Because of these repeating patterns, so many of us have suffered, but most don't know what we're suffering from or why. We've created stories that we either heard or have been telling ourselves for years, but we don't honestly know what is or is not valid. In many cases, we relinquish ourselves to quiet suffering, or so we believe. The problem is that our suffering is never as quiet as we imagine. As we agonize, many surrounding us see and know we are in distress, but they don't know how to help or cannot due to their own torment. Our anguish spills over and out from us for all to witness, even as we refuse to accept it ourselves. Too often, we have gotten lost within the abuses, traumas. See page 42 for an explanation on why I spell trauma the way that I do. Capital T, bracket, lowercase t, close bracket, trauma, and the negative programming we've endured through life. This book is about how to heal these traumas and negative programs. Healing is a challenging way out from programming or traumas. It takes courage and fortitude because the way we heal is to go directly into the darkness that was forged within us. We can't heal by avoiding the pain and suffering we experienced. Instead, we must courageously walk directly into those things that cause us to suffer the most. We must be willing to face what scares us head on and trust that we will emerge victorious on the other side. That is the most accurate definition of faith in human existence. Healing now is essential because every day that we don't truly dive deep into healing our past, we leave the beauty of ourselves in the shadows. We fail to unshackle ourselves from the traumas, negative programming, and limiting beliefs that keep plaguing and preventing us from being who we truly want to be. I struggled for years, unable to heal myself from so much darkness. I now understand that the pain and suffering are merely the symptoms of the underlying traumas, negative programs, and negative belief systems. If we don't heal ourselves, we remain lost in the darkness of our suffering. That is why I choose to heal time and time again. I now know that as we heal our traumas, our negative programs and negative belief systems, we set ourselves free from the pain and suffering. The more we recognize, trace to the root causes, and heal, the more we can craft the life we want for ourselves. I know you can heal yourself because you've already purchased this book. You've chosen to free yourself. A little about my story. Quote, "If you focus on the hurt, you will continue to suffer. If you focus on the lesson, you will continue to grow." Found at Mastering Law of Attraction. I grew up in a small town in southern Louisiana as part of a lower middle class family. By the time I was 12 years old, I knew my childhood was deplorable. Before and after this understanding, I would cry myself to sleep, knowing I was trapped within a family that was mentally cruel, physically abusive, controlling, manipulative, and neglectful. I was unable then to begin to heal, nor did I know what healing meant. But as I matured, I struggled to correct the horrific childhood and teen years that ensued. My childhood was difficult, which significantly influenced how I received programming during my formative years. Because my older brother, Kenny, father, Ken, and mother, Juanita, constantly shouted negative statements, names, criticisms, and taunts at me all day and night, I became an open receptor for negative programming. Everything they did, intentionally or unintentionally, was programming me in a negative manner. Rarely did I hear a compliment, a positive word, or phrases of love. In fact, the first time I can recall Ken telling me, "I'm sorry and I love you," was when I was 13 and a window fell on the back of my neck, severing an artery and barely missing my spinal column. The negative programming led me to years of negative self-programming based on what existed in familial cycles of abuse. I experienced an excessive number of traumas throughout my birth, childhood, and teen years. From the earliest parts of my childhood, I swore that the milkman must have dropped me off with the morning milk because I didn't fit within this family. Both sides of my family are narcissistic and, dare I say, sociopathic, while exhibiting intense ancestral patterns that have guided so many within the lineage for centuries. The need to control is paramount and is at the root of all familial behaviors. My parents were physically, verbally, and mentally abusive. If they could manipulate you to get what they wanted, they did. This was all done to them, and their parents also repeated these patterns based on what was done to them. Unfortunately, it doesn't end with those traits, but begins with them. Sexual abuses were commonplace and a regular part of the ancestral dysfunctions. It is challenging to control another human being, but these ancestors instinctively know how to control others and master the process. This was the life and family I was born into. I remained with them until I was around 17. I had emancipation papers drawn up, but I didn't force Ken or Juanita, father and mother respectively, to sign them. My life might have been vastly different had I emancipated myself and never returned to them. But then, this book would not have been written. I will draw on the events from my childhood and formative years to inspire hope in your healing journey. The intention behind writing a series of books on healing is evident. I have spent most of my adult life learning how to heal from the traumas and the negative programming of my past. I will share portions of these traumatic events and the subsequent negative programming I received throughout these pages. These events and my family molded a man who resided within me for far too long. The most important occurrence in my past was recognizing and accepting what had happened to me. The impacts of trauma and negative programming have taken enormous efforts and time for me to heal. I knew that I had choices and that I could give in to using drugs or alcohol to escape the pain and suffering. I also knew one of my choices was to heal from the many traumas and negative programming to become the man I want to be. I struggled with triggers and repeating patterns that made no sense. I was trying to heal the symptoms causing my pain and suffering. Still, I never identified the triggers, the limiting belief systems, the negative programming, or the underlying traumas. In all, I was unable to truly heal because I was not finding the root cause of these triggers. If you could imagine me like a dog chasing my tail, but never actually understanding why my tail wagged. I had to get out of my way and accept that my patterns, triggers, and everything else were about me and not about my parents, siblings, or childhood. Yes, the root of it all came from my formative years and the damage caused by the family. But I continued programming myself for years after the family's initial impact. I had to reach a point where I wasn't blaming everyone else for my problems and needed to accept responsibility. I had been telling myself a story that the abuses of my parents, the molestation and rape by my brother, were the root of all my tribulations. I wasn't telling myself that while these traumas and the negative programming I received from these people established a foundation that created me, I was ultimately responsible for my own life and the continued programming that persisted for many years beyond the familial abuses. These events in my family had molded a wounded man who'd resided within me. What is healing and why is it so important? Quote, "The cry we hear from deep in our hearts comes from the wounded child within. Healing this inner child's pain is the key to transforming anger, sadness, and fear." Thich Nhat Hanh. Healing begins with being humble and avoiding excessive self-criticism. It is okay to be exactly where you are in life. Be grateful for the place you are and for the opportunity to begin, relaunch, or continue a healing journey. Healing means understanding that you are exactly where you should be given your life, while accepting what experiences and or negative programming and the traumas received are simply part of who you've become. Healing is taking responsibility for where you are now rather than blaming others for how you got there. Healing is the willingness to work hard because it sometimes worsens before it improves. Healing is being grateful for all progress, regardless of how significant or minuscule it may be. Healing work takes time, effort, and courage. What I can tell you is that your life will change as you start to heal the pain, misery, and anguish you currently suffer. Sometimes it will change in small and insignificant ways. At other times, it will be so profound that knowing what life was like before will be challenging. The healing process is the same whether we are healing a trauma or negative programming. It won't matter if we find ourselves being triggered and follow the threads with the underlying trauma and or negative programming. We may often find that negative programming caused the trigger or even the trauma. It should never alarm you if we also find that a trauma has one or multiple negative programs associated with it. Healing develops skills within us that prevent what could be traumatic experience from becoming something we cannot accept, understand, or deal with. The world is filled with human beings, and humans are very unpredictable. Healing will never mean that you won't have a bad day. It also doesn't mean you won't ever be triggered again. However, healing teaches us how to navigate through bad days, weeks, months, or even years. As you heal, you will mature, grow, and manage life's mysteries differently. Doing this allows us to become the person we want to be, rather than living life as others see and expect us to. I love my life now and am immensely grateful for everything I've had to traverse to get here. Quote, "Trauma creates change you don't choose. Healing is about creating change you do choose." Thank you very much. We will do next week another book reading. We will extend into our next chapter. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.